Yesterday, I did talk about the ancient Egyptian civilization as a historical background before commencing to talk about the Egyptian philosophy. And I told that there have been several kingdoms in ancient times in Egypt. Its capital city was Memphis, ancient Egypt, which was a great city on the banks of the river Nile. And in ancient times, the old kingdom was very powerful. Then, after historical stages, the second Middle Kingdom period occurred. Thereafter, the New Kingdom period. These are the historical periods of the Egyptian monarchs, the pharaohs, who ruled Egypt for several centuries. In between all these periods, there occurred intermediate periods as well by the internal civil and conflict and invasions. There have been more than 3 intermediate periods. First period, second period, third period, and the last period. Thereafter, the Roman occupation occurred. And before Roman occupation, ancient Egypt was under the rule of Ptolemy dynasty. Ptolemy was actually Alexander's great military leader. After Alexander's premature death, Ptolemy took over Egypt as a province. And Ptolemy made a dynasty in Egypt. Ptolemy first. Thereafter, the Ptolemy dynasty witnessed several leaders. The Ptolemy kingdom was formed in ancient Egypt after the premature death of Alexander the Great and began to rule Egypt until 30 BC. The Queen Cleopatra was one of the outstanding rulers. The Queen Cleopatra was one of the outstanding rulers in ancient Egypt until it fell into the hands of the Roman Empire. Egypt remained for a long time as a Roman province until 640 AD. And then it was conquered by the Islam, Rashidun Caliphate. Queen Cleopatra ruled Egypt from 51 BC to 30 BC and remained as its last active ruler in Ptolemy dynasty. She was the daughter of ruler Ptolemy XII. Ptolemy XII Auletes. He was a great king. He had several children, and his daughter was Cleopatra. However, he could have to leave Egypt along with his daughter Cleopatra, since after a revolt and an open civil war broke out in Egypt. It was led by his other legitimate daughter and her other siblings. And Ptolemy II feared a defeat and he fled to Rome along with his daughter Cleopatra. And during his exile life, he made contacts with the Roman chieftains and senators and other prominent political leaders. And when the time was ripe, he returned back to Egypt with his daughter Cleopatra, and reinforced his army and engaged into a civil battle against the usurpers of power. Berenice's war was Ptolemy's illegitimate daughter, and her siblings were his enemies, his rivals, and he defeated all of them on the banks of the Nile River and conquered again Egypt and ascended to the throne. Ptolemy began to rule Egypt for a long period, and after his death in 51 BC, Cleopatra, his daughter, ascended to power with the help of her sibling, brother, Ptolemy 13. However, during a long period of rule, Cleopatra also began to feel about dissidence in her kingdom. His siblings, other siblings began to hate her, and they began to make uprisings and revolt against her administration. This political setback, this revolt and internal civil war, made and almost compelled and made Cleopatra to flee toward Rome again. Cleopatra then have a relation with Julius Caesar. Before Julius Caesar has been on an expedition to conquer all other provinces across Europe and in the Middle East area. And Cleopatra met him secretly and made a ruse and made a pact to help her. And Julius Caesar helped her to suppress her rival siblings in Egypt. And after the severe battle of Nile, with the help of the Roman armies, Cleopatra again conquered all her rivals and ascended to power. During this time, she made an affair with Julius Caesar. Her secret love with Caesar made her pregnant, and she had a child born from Julius Caesar. Yes. However, Julius Caesar was also facing a severe conflict in Rome itself, in the capital city of Rome. There were several senators who were conspiring against him. In ancient Rome, there had been 200 senators, and among of which 60 senators were against him. The conspirators, a particular caucus, who conspired to assassinate Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar was at the time returned back to Rome, where he began to face severe internal civil war, and he had to suppress all of them. The senators intensified the situation, and they created a plot to assassinate Julius Caesar. And they made a plot in Pompey City, in Pompey Theatre, where they decided to create a senators' assembly just far away from Roman city, and decided to assassinate Julius Caesar right at there. Julius Caesar was just ignorant about them, conspiracy. And he traveled toward Pompey city and came into Pompey theatre, where he was planned to be get murdered. And Julius Caesar, while entering into the Pompey theatre, the senators received him cordially and he began to address them. Meanwhile, he began to address the senators, the conspirators. There were three of them surrounded around him, surrounded at his side. And these conspirators were real assassins, and they resolved to collectively stab Caesar. And they were Marcus Junius Brutus, Gaius Cassius Casca, and Decimus Junius Brutus. And while Julius Caesar was addressing to the senators, there were 200 senators and 60 dissident senators against him, conspirators. The assassins surrounded Julius Caesar and began to stab. They stabbed him 23 times. And from the rear, Marcus Junius Brutus stabbed him. And he was really surprised and he yelled, "You too, Brutus," whom he sincerely confided to believe as his son and follower. And this was the last words Julius Caesar uttered, and he fell back and died. This was the assassination of Julius Caesar. After Julius Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra was really panic-stricken. She was so afraid of the aftermath of Julius Caesar. And she began to make a pact with Mark Antony. Mark Antony rose to a great prominent position in Rome, in Roman city, along with Octavius Caesar. Octavius Caesar was Julius Caesar's grandson and an adopted son as his successor, heir apparent. And this situation made Cleopatra to make a pact with Mark Antony. And Mark Antony and his Roman military forces came to Egypt and helped Cleopatra to suppress her dissident enemies. Her dissidents, her real enemies, or her siblings as well. All of them were murdered, and Mark Antony began an affair with Cleopatra and had 3 children. Meanwhile, Octavius Caesar rose to power in Rome, and he understood that Cleopatra is having an affair with Mark Antony and had 3 children during the course of time. This really infuriated Octavius Caesar because his own sister was already married to Mark Antony, and finally Mark Antony divorced her. This was the irritating situation Octavius Caesar was facing as a Roman ruler. And he began to retaliate against Cleopatra, and he sent an army to invade Egypt. And this situation worsened and a war broke out. Mark Antony and Cleopatra defended severely against Octavius Caesar's army. And during the war, they began to feel a defeat, a great failure. And Mark Antony committed suicide. And this news really flabbergasted and literally battered up Cleopatra. And she did also commit suicide. It is learned that she was committed suicide by using a snake to bite her. The snake bite had, and its venom, toxic venom, had outright killed her. This was the historical evidence gathered by historians. And after Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemy dynasty began to face severe setbacks. The internal civil war also intensified. And during this time, and during this period, In 640 AD, the Islam Caliphate was increasingly very powerful across the Middle East, and they invaded Egypt and conquered Egypt completely under the Islam Rashidun Caliphate. This is the historical background of Egypt. And in our next episode, we can talk about the Egyptian philosophy, ancient philosophy. Now let me stop this episode.